The security camera blinked at me mockingly as I stood on my own front porch, still wearing my custom-tailored suit after a grueling 12-hour negotiation with international investors. My shoulders ached, my head was pounding, and all I wanted was to collapse into my own bed. Instead, I was staring at Vanessa's cold face through the doorbell camera, trying to process what she just told me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I mean it, James, she continued, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against something off-screen. You've been lying to me for years. This marriage was never real. The bile rose in my throat as my wife's face filled the small screen. My own front door locked against me. 3 cardboard boxes with my clothes spilling out sat beside the door. They hadn't been there when I left for work this morning. I could see some of my designer ties spilling out of the top one, hastily shoved in without care. My name is James Parker, and at 35 I was living through every husband's worst nightmare. But unlike most men in my position, I'd seen this coming from a mile away. Vanessa Parker had been showing signs of discontent in our marriage since the day I announced our company was facing financial troubles 6 months ago. It started small. Complaints about having to cut back on shopping trips, disappointed sighs when I mentioned we needed to downsize our vacation plans, constant criticism of my failure as a provider. But over the past month, things had escalated. She'd gone from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. And tonight, on our 5th wedding anniversary, was clearly her grand finale. I shifted my weight, adjusting my grip on my briefcase as I maintained eye contact with the camera. "Vanessa, please," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Can we talk about this face-to-face?" Vanessa's laugh crackled through the speaker. "There's nothing to talk about. I married a successful businessman. Not some failure who can't even afford to take his wife to dinner at Bellini's anymore." She held up what looked like a stack of papers. "I've already called my lawyer." "It's over, James." "Please," I replied, already pulling out my phone. "We can work through this. The company is just going through a rough patch." "A rough patch?" she scoffed. 6 months of rough patch is enough. Ryan says I deserve better. My blood ran cold. Ryan Thompson, my supposed friend and business associate. Ryan? I managed to keep my voice level despite the betrayal cutting through me like a knife. "Yes, Ryan?" she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "At least he knows how to treat a woman. Unlike you." I took a deep breath. "Vanessa," I said calmly, "I'm going to give you one chance to open this door and explain what's really going on. Because right now you're committing several crimes, and I don't think you want me to start listing them." She scoffed. "Crimes? This is my house too. I have every right to—" "This is my house." I cut her off, my voice sharp. "My name is on the deed. I paid for it with my own money before we were even married. And what you're doing right now is illegal entry, theft, and harassment. Just for starters." There was a pause, and I could almost see the wheels turning in her head. "You're bluffing," she said finally. But there was a note of uncertainty in her voice now. I smiled, remembering the day I'd bought this place. Vanessa had been furious about putting only my name on the deed, but I'd insisted. For tax purposes, I told her. But really, it was because I'd seen the way she looked at our friends. Larger homes. The way her eyes lit up at expensive things. The way she measured everyone by the size of their bank accounts. "Would you like me to have my lawyer explain it to you?" I asked, already pulling up Michael's number on my phone. "He'd be happy to walk you through exactly how much trouble you're in right now." "You're bluffing," Vanessa snapped, but I could hear the fear creeping into her voice. "You can't even afford a decent lawyer anymore." "I'm not bluffing," I interrupted again. "And I'm done talking through a camera. You have exactly 30 minutes to open this door and get out of my house before I call the police. Your choice, Vanessa." I turned and walked back to my car, settling into the driver's seat. My hands were shaking slightly as I pulled out my phone, but my mind was clear. I'd been preparing for something like this ever since I decided to test my wife's loyalty 6 months ago. The financial troubles had been entirely fabricated, a test to see if Vanessa truly meant those wedding vows about for richer or poorer. Our company, Parker International, was actually thriving, with record profits and expansion into Asian markets. But I'd carefully crafted the illusion of impending bankruptcy, watching as Vanessa's mask of loving wife slowly slipped away. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I called Michael, my lawyer and closest friend since boarding school. He picked up on the second ring. "Let me guess," he said. The gold digger finally showed her true colors. "She changed my locks," I replied, watching the house. "Claims she's leaving me for Ryan. She's barricaded herself inside with some story about calling her lawyer." Michael's sharp intake of breath was followed by the sound of typing. "Ryan Thompson? Your VP of sales?" "The very same," I confirmed, my jaw clenching involuntarily. "Want me to send the police?" Michael asked. I considered it for a moment. "Not yet. Give me 30 minutes to try something first, but stay on standby." I scrolled through my contacts until I found Sarah Parker, my younger sister. She picked up almost immediately. "James? What's wrong? You never call this late." "Sarah, I need your help," I said, keeping my voice low. The plan worked a little too well. Vanessa's locked me out of the house and is threatening divorce. She's also apparently been seeing Ryan behind my back. Sarah's gasp was audible, even through the phone. "That witch! I told you she was only after your money." I know. I sighed, watching as lights flicked on and off inside my house. Vanessa was clearly agitated, probably trying to figure out her next move. "Is it time for phase 2? Sarah asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. She'd never approved of Vanessa, had seen through her facade from day one. "Yes," I replied. "Call the board members. Tell them to meet me at the office in an hour. And Sarah? Bring the real financial reports." The drive to Parker International's headquarters felt longer than usual, each minute stretching with possibilities. Would this work? Had I pushed too far? And most importantly, what would happen when Vanessa learned the truth? Sarah met me outside the office building 45 minutes later, her face grim as she handed me a thick folder. "Everything's here. The actual profits, the offshore accounts, the new Asian contracts. Enough to prove that you've been testing her." I nodded, taking the folder. "Are they all here?" "Everyone's waiting in the conference room," she confirmed. "Including Ryan." My jaw tightened at the mention of his name. "He had no idea you were on to him," Sarah added. "Showed up thinking it was an emergency budget meeting." The conference room fell silent as I walked in, all eyes turning to me. The board members, 12 of our company's most trusted executives, sat around the large table. Ryan Thompson sat near the far end, his face paling when he saw my expression. "Gentlemen, ladies," I began, placing the folder on the table. "Thank you for coming at such short notice. I apologize for the deception, but as some of you already know, the TACAT financial crisis our company has supposedly been facing for the past 6 months has been entirely fabricated." Murmurs broke out around the table. Ryan's face grew even paler. "This was a test," I continued, opening the folder to reveal pages of financial reports showing remarkable growth. "A test of loyalty, both in business and in my personal life." I fixed Ryan with a cold stare. Unfortunately, some people failed that test spectacularly. Ryan stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "James, I can explain." "Sit down," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. He sat, sweat beading on his forehead. "As these reports clearly show, Parker International is not only solvent, but thriving. Our Asian expansion has exceeded projections by 300%. Our stock value, which I've artificially kept suppressed, will rise approximately 200% when the true numbers are released tomorrow." I looked around the room, meeting each board member's eyes. I needed to know who would stand by this company, and by me, when times seemed tough. Who would jump ship at the first sign of trouble? My gaze settled on Ryan. And who would betray not just business trust, but personal loyalty as well? "You son of a," Ryan began, half rising again. "You're fired, Ryan," I interrupted calmly. "And the security team is waiting outside to escort you from the building. The evidence of your embezzlement, yes, we know about that too, has already been forwarded to the police." As Ryan was led away, shouting threats and denials, I turned back to the board. "I apologize for the unorthodox methods, but they were necessary. Each of you in this room passed the test. You stood firm, offered solutions, worked harder when you thought we were struggling. For that, you'll all be receiving substantial bonuses when the real numbers are made public." The meeting continued for another hour as I outlined our actual financial position and future plans. By the time it concluded, my phone had 17 missed calls from Vanessa. I ignored them all. Instead, I called Michael again. "Everything set on your end?" I asked, as Sarah drove us back toward my house. "All ready," Michael confirmed. "Divorce papers are prepared with the infidelity clause highlighted. Security team is standing by. And the evidence of Ryan's embezzlement has been sent to the prosecutor's office." When we arrived back at the house, the front door was open. Vanessa's car was still in the driveway, but the boxes of my belongings had been brought back inside. Sarah squeezed my arm supportively before staying in the car, giving me privacy for what would come next. I walked into the house to find Vanessa sitting on the living room couch, her makeup streaked with tears, her phone clutched in her hand. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. "Ryan just called me," she said, her voice shaking. "He said you set us up, that the company was never in trouble, that it was all some kind of sick test." I set my briefcase down calmly, looking around at our expensively decorated living room, all items she had insisted we needed. "Not a test, Vanessa, a revelation." Her face contorted with anger as she stood up. "You lied to me. For 6 months you made me think we were going broke." "And you showed me exactly who you are," I replied evenly. "The moment you thought my bank account was emptying, your love vanished. Quite enlightening, don't you think?" She took a step toward me, eyes narrowing. "You had no right." I had every right to know if my wife actually meant her vows. I cut her off. "For richer, for poorer, remember those words, Vanessa? Apparently, they only applied to the richer part for you." She faltered, then switched tactics, her expression softening as she reached for me. "James, baby, I was just scared. You know how I grew up. We had nothing. The thought of going back to that." I stepped away from her touch. "Don't. I heard everything you said to Ryan on the phone. The plans you made together. How long have you been sleeping with him, Vanessa? 3 months? 4? Her face hardened again, the mask dropping completely. "Fine. Yes, Ryan appreciated me. He didn't play mind games or hide money." "Ryan was embezzling from the company," I said flatly. "He's being arrested as we speak. Excellent choice in men, really." The color drained from her face. "You're lying." "I'm not, but that's not your concern anymore." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, tossing it onto the coffee table. "Divorce papers. The prenup you so reluctantly signed is being enforced to the letter, infidelity clause included." She lunged for the papers, ripping them open. "This says I get nothing. You can't do this." "I can, and I am," I replied calmly. "You have until tomorrow morning to pack your essentials and leave. The rest of your belongings will be sent to whatever address you provide my lawyer." "You bastard," she hissed, tears of rage replacing the false ones from earlier. "I gave you 5 years of my life. And I gave you every material thing you ever asked for." I countered. "Designer clothes, luxury vacations, this house filled with everything you wanted. But it was never enough, was it, Vanessa? You wanted the money, not me." She tried several more tactics, tears, seduction, threats, but I remained unmoved. Finally, defeated, she stormed upstairs to pack. I watched her go, feeling not triumph, but a profound sadness. 5 years of marriage, and I'd never really known the woman I'd shared my life with. Sarah came in once Vanessa was upstairs, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, though we both knew I wasn't. Not yet. You did the right thing, she assured me. She never deserved you. That night I slept in the guest room, listening to Vanessa's angry movements as she packed. By morning she was gone, leaving behind only a wedding photo with my face scratched out, her final petty gesture. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The company's true financial status was revealed to the public, sending our stock soaring. Ryan's embezzlement scandal made headlines, followed by his arrest. Vanessa attempted to challenge the prenup, but backed down when Michael threatened to countersue for her involvement in Ryan's schemes. 3 months after that fateful night, I sat in my office, reviewing reports of our latest expansion. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting Sarah or one of the executives. Instead, Lisa Chen, our brilliant head of R&D, stepped in. She'd been one of the few executives who'd approached me during our financial crisis with solutions rather than complaints. I have the projections for the new product line, she said, placing a folder on my desk. Her eyes met mine, direct and honest as always. And I wanted to check if you're coming to the team dinner tonight. Everyone's been worried about you. I smiled, the first genuine smile in months. I'll be there. After she left, I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on what I'd learned from my elaborate test. I'd lost a wife who never truly loved me, but I'd gained something far more valuable: clarity. I knew who stood by me when it mattered, who could be trusted when times were tough. The divorce was finalized a month later. I heard through mutual friends that Vanessa had moved to a smaller city, working as a real estate agent, and telling anyone who would listen that I was a manipulative monster who had tricked her. I didn't bother to correct the narrative. Those who mattered knew the truth. 6 months after Vanessa left, I found myself having dinner with Lisa. What had started as work discussions had gradually evolved into something more personal, more real. Unlike Vanessa, Lisa had never been impressed by displays of wealth. She'd grown up with modest means and had built her career through intelligence and hard work. When I told her about my test and Vanessa's betrayal, she listened without judgment. I understand why you did it, she said finally, but promise me something? Anything, I replied, meaning it. No more tests. When you're ready to trust again, just trust. Or don't. But games like that hurt everyone involved, including you. She was right, of course. The test had revealed Vanessa's true nature, but it had also changed me, made me harder, more cynical. It had been necessary, perhaps, but it had left scars on both sides. A year after my divorce, Parker International had expanded to become a global leader in our industry. I'd established a foundation using a portion of our profits to help underprivileged students pursue business education. Life had moved forward in ways I never expected. Lisa and I continued dating, our relationship deepening into something I'd never experienced with Vanessa, a partnership of equals, based on mutual respect and genuine caring rather than material expectations. She challenged me, supported me, and never once measured my worth by the size of my bank account. One evening, as we walked along the waterfront near my home, Lisa asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you ever regret it, the test? I considered carefully before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret not seeing Vanessa clearly from the beginning. But no, I don't regret learning the truth, even though the method was extreme. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. For what it's worth, I think it showed incredible strength. Not the deception itself, but facing the truth once you had it. Many people would have denied it, tried to save a marriage that wasn't real. Her words struck me deeply. She was right. The test had been manipulative, perhaps even cruel in some ways. But facing the reality of my marriage, accepting that the woman I'd loved had never truly loved me back, that had required a different kind of courage. The last I heard of Vanessa, she'd tried to reconnect with Ryan after his release from prison, only to discover he'd made a plea deal that implicated her in knowledge of his embezzlement. Her reputation in ruins, she'd moved across the country to start over. As for me, I'd learned that true wealth had nothing to do with the money in my accounts. It was found in knowing who would stand beside you when everything seemed to be falling apart, and in being the kind of person who would do the same for others. If you're watching this and something feels off in your relationship, If you're wondering whether you're valued for yourself or for what you provide, pay attention to that feeling. Not everyone needs to go to the extremes I did to find the truth. Sometimes, the signs are there all along, if we're brave enough to see them. Remember that genuine love isn't about what you have. It's about who you are. It stands firm through success and failure, wealth and poverty. It doesn't waver when the bank account dips or when challenges arise. And most importantly, it never makes you feel like you have to be anything other than exactly who you are. 2 years after the divorce, I found myself at a charity gala hosted by Parker International. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the quiet hum of the city's elite exchanging pleasantries. I adjusted my cufflinks, platinum with sapphire insets, a gift from Lisa on our first anniversary of dating, and surveyed the room. Success surrounded me, but it was a different kind than what I'd once chased. "James Parker!" A booming voice cut through the ambient chatter. I turned to see Gregory Hamilton, one of our major investors, approaching with a champagne flute in hand. The man of the hour! That Asian expansion was nothing short of brilliant. I smiled, accepting his handshake. Hardly my achievement alone. The team deserves the credit. My eyes drifted to where Lisa stood across the room, engaged in deep conversation with our head of sustainability initiatives. She caught my glance and smiled, a small, private thing meant only for me. "Humble as always," Gregory chuckled. "But between us," he lowered his voice, "word on the street is that Vanessa's been trying to get back into the social circuit, claiming she was the brains behind your early success." He winced immediately. "Sorry, old boy. Didn't mean to bring up unpleasantness." I waved away his concern. "Ancient history, Gregory." Truly. And surprisingly it was. The mention of Vanessa's name no longer triggered the sharp pain it once had. Instead, I felt a detached sort of pity. "I wish her well." Gregory's eyebrows shot up. "Magnanimous of you, considering." He trailed off, then brightened. "Ah, there's Winston. Must chat about that racehorse. Excuse me, James." As he moved away, I felt a gentle touch at my elbow. Lisa had materialized beside me, radiant in a simple emerald gown that highlighted the intelligence in her eyes rather than flaunting wealth. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I saw Gregory talking to you." "I'm fine," I said, meaning it. "He mentioned Vanessa is trying to rewrite our history." Lisa's expression tightened slightly, protective. "And that bothers you?" I considered this, then shook my head. "Not anymore. She's welcome to whatever narrative helps her sleep at night." I took Lisa's hand, running my thumb over her knuckles. "I know the truth. The people who matter know the truth. That's enough." Lisa studied my face, then nodded, satisfied with what she saw. "The new scholarship recipients are here. Want to meet them?" I smiled, feeling a genuine surge of excitement. The Parker Foundation Scholarship Program had quickly become my passion project, identifying promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds and providing not just education funding, but mentorship and internship opportunities. "Lead the way," I told her, and as we crossed the ballroom, I reflected on how different this felt from the social events I'd attended with Vanessa. Those had been performances, strategic networking, appearances to maintain, an exhausting dance of impression management. This was purpose. This was real. The scholarship recipients, 5 brilliant young minds with fire in their eyes and determination in their posture, reminded me of myself at their age, hungry for opportunity and willing to work twice as hard to prove myself. Before my family's wealth, before Parker International, I had been just like them, a kid with big dreams and limited resources. As I listened to their stories and ambitions, I felt a warmth spreading through my chest that no business acquisition had ever provided. This, I realized, was the legacy I wanted, not just corporate success, but human impact. These students would go on to build businesses, create jobs, solve problems. They would change lives, just as mine had been changed. Later that evening, as Lisa and I walked along the river path near my house, our house now, though she maintained her own apartment out of principle, I found myself thinking about journeys. Not just my own, but the universal human experience of finding one's way through betrayal and disappointment towards something authentic. "You're quiet," Lisa observed, her breath visible in the cool night air. Good quiet or bad quiet? Good, I assured her, squeezing her hand. I was just thinking about how sometimes the most painful detours lead us exactly where we need to be. She nodded, understanding immediately. Lisa always did. Vanessa was a detour. She was, I agreed. A necessary one, maybe. I needed to learn that lesson. Lisa stopped walking, turning to face me directly. The moonlight silvered her features, highlighting the strength there. What lesson exactly? I considered carefully. That I was measuring success all wrong. That I was letting external validation, money, status, having the perfect wife, define my worth. I shook my head ruefully. I attracted exactly the kind of partner who reinforced those values. And now? Lisa prompted gently. Now I know that true wealth isn't what you have, but who you become, who you help. The legacy you create that has nothing to do with dollar signs. I met her eyes, seeing my future reflected there, and finding someone who values the journey, not just the destination. Lisa smiled, a slow unfurling of joy that never failed to catch my breath. That's a much better metric, she agreed, rising on her toes to kiss me softly. 3 days later, an unexpected email arrived in my inbox. The sender, Vanessa Parker, though she'd legally reverted to her maiden name, Matthews. The subject line, closure. My finger hovered over the delete button. I had no obligation to read whatever justification or accusation she'd crafted. But curiosity, or perhaps some lingering need for resolution, won out. I opened it. James, I won't pretend this is easy to write. Pride has always been my downfall, as you well know. But I've been in therapy for a year now, stop laughing, and my therapist insists that making amends is necessary for moving forward. So here I am, making amends. Or trying to. What you did, the test, the deception, was cruel. I still believe that. But I've had to acknowledge, painfully, that my response revealed truths about myself I'd been avoiding. I didn't love you the way you deserved. I loved what you represented. Security, status, the life I thought I wanted. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for a response. I just wanted you to know that I've been facing some hard truths about myself. And while I still think your methods were extreme, I understand why you felt they were necessary. I hear your company is doing well. The foundation too. That doesn't surprise me. For all our problems, your business instincts were never in question. I've started over in Seattle. Small real estate firm, modest apartment, no designer labels. It's strange how freeing it is to step off the hamster wheel of constantly wanting more. I'm dating someone, a teacher. He makes a fraction of what you do, but he's kind in ways I'm only beginning to appreciate. Anyway, that's all. I don't expect we'll speak again, but I wanted to close this chapter properly. I hope you found happiness, James. I think maybe I finally understand what that actually means. Vanessa? I sat back in my chair, a strange mix of emotions washing through me. Vindication, yes. A certain satisfaction in her acknowledgement, but also something unexpected. Respect for her courage in writing the email at all. The Vanessa I'd known would have maintained her righteous indignation to the grave. After careful consideration, I typed a brief reply. Vanessa, thank you for your email. It couldn't have been easy to write, and I appreciate the honesty. For what it's worth, I agree that my methods were extreme. In retrospect, there were probably healthier ways to address my concerns. I'm glad to hear you're building a life that feels authentic. That's all any of us can really strive for. I wish you well. James I sent it before I could overthink, then closed my laptop. The exchange left me feeling lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. The past was finally truly past. When I told Lisa about the exchange that evening, she listened thoughtfully, then offered a perspective I hadn't considered. You know, in a strange way, you two deserved each other back then. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. How so? You were both chasing external validation, she explained gently. You through success and having the perfect wife, her through wealth and status. You were mirrors of the same fundamental insecurity, just expressed differently. The observation stung, but I couldn't deny its accuracy. That's uncomfortably perceptive. Lisa shrugged, smiling softly. That's why you love me, isn't it? I don't just tell you what you want to hear. I pulled her close, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who saw me clearly, flaws and all, and loved me anyway. Not for my bank account or my business acumen, but for the person I was beneath all the trappings of success. That's exactly why I love you, I murmured against her hair. And in that moment, I knew what my next step needed to be. The proposal wasn't elaborate or showy. Lisa would have hated that. Instead, on a random Tuesday evening as we worked side by side in the home office, I simply slid a small box across the desk to her. She looked up from her laptop, confusion crossing her features before understanding dawned. James? Open it, I encouraged softly. Inside wasn't a massive diamond that screamed wealth and status, the kind of ring I would have chosen for Vanessa. Instead, a simple sapphire set in platinum winked up at her, elegant and understated, just like the woman I hoped would wear it. I had it made from my grandfather's cufflinks, I explained as she stared at it in silence. He was the one who taught me that character matters more than money, that how you treat people is the true measure of success. I moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in mine. I lost sight of that for a while. You helped me find it again. Tears glistened in her eyes. Are you sure? After everything with Vanessa? I've never been more sure of anything, I said firmly. You're not a replacement, Lisa. You're a revelation. You've shown me what real partnership looks like. Supporting each other, challenging each other, growing together. I took a deep breath. I love you not for what you bring to my life, but for who you help me become. Will you marry me? She launched herself into my arms with such force that we both tumbled to the floor, laughing. Yes, she whispered against my lips. But I have one condition. Anything, I promised, meaning it completely. We write our own vows. And no, for richer or poorer. That's implied. Her eyes sparkled with mischief and love. Instead, let's promise to remind each other what really matters. To never measure success by anything except how true we've been to ourselves and how much good we've done in the world. Those are perfect vows, I agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. The wedding was intimate. Just 50 guests at a small vineyard outside the city. No society photographers, no strategic invitations to business associates who might be useful. Just the people who truly mattered to us, gathered to witness our commitment. As Lisa walked toward me down the grassy aisle, radiant in a simple gown that made her look like she was glowing from within, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the painful journey that had led me here. Without Vanessa's betrayal, without that elaborate test that revealed the hollow core of our marriage, I might never have recognized true love when it finally found me. My vows, when I spoke them, came from a place of hard-won wisdom. I promise to value you for your heart and mind, never for what you bring to my life materially. I promise to measure our success not by bank accounts or possessions, but by kindness, integrity, and the difference we make together. I promise to remember, every day, that love isn't proven in grand gestures or expensive gifts, but in small moments of truth and support. And I promise that you will never have to pass a test to prove your worth to me. I see it clearly, every day, in everything you are. Lisa's answering vows brought tears to my eyes and gentle laughter from our guests. I promise to call you out when you slip back into measuring yourself by the wrong metrics. I promise to stand beside you in failure as readily as in success, knowing that both are just stops on the journey, not destinations. I promise to love the man, not the CEO. And I promise that our home will always be a place where honesty doesn't require elaborate schemes, just the courage to speak truth to each other, even when it's difficult. The reception was a joyful celebration, free from the networking and posturing that had characterized social events in my previous life. I watched as Lisa danced with her father, her face alight with genuine happiness, and marveled at how differently this all felt. Sarah appeared at my side, champagne in hand. "You got it right this time, big brother," she said, following my gaze to Lisa. "She loves James, not James Parker, CEO." "I know," I replied, unable to keep the wonder from my voice. "Sometimes I still can't believe it." "Believe it," Sarah said firmly. "You deserve this. You've always deserved this." She clinked her glass against mine. "To second chances, and to getting it right." To getting it right, I echoed, and as I took a sip, I noticed a familiar figure slipping into the back of the tent. Ryan Thompson, looking considerably less polished than he once had, his designer suit replaced by an off-the-rack number that hung awkwardly on his frame. Sarah followed my gaze and stiffened. "What is he doing here? I'll have security." I placed a hand on her arm. "No, it's okay. I invited him." "You what?" Her eyes widened in disbelief. "After everything he did?" I nodded, watching as Ryan stood awkwardly at the periphery, clearly uncomfortable but determined. "Part of moving forward is facing the past. Besides," I added with a small smile, "I think he's here to apologize, not cause trouble." Sarah looked skeptical but didn't argue further. I made my way through the crowd to where Ryan stood, his posture stiffening as I approached. "James." He greeted me, voice tight with tension. "Beautiful wedding. Thank you for the invitation." "Thank you for coming," I replied evenly. "I wasn't sure you would." He swallowed hard, eyes darting around before settling back on me. "I almost didn't. Pride, you know." A self-deprecating smile flickered across his face. "But my therapist thought it would be good for my recovery, part of making amends." "Recovery?" I inquired, genuinely curious. "Gambling addiction," he admitted, the words clearly difficult. "That's what started the embezzlement. Got in over my head with some bad people." He shook his head. "Not an excuse, just context." I nodded, pieces falling into place that I hadn't seen before. The erratic behavior, the desperate need for cash, the increasingly risky business moves. "I didn't know." "I didn't want anyone to know," he said simply. "Especially not you. You always seemed so together, so in control. I was falling apart and trying to hide it." He took a deep breath. "Anyway, I came to say congratulations, and I'm sorry for everything. The money, Vanessa, the betrayal. You deserved better from a friend." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. I studied him for a moment, seeing not the polished, confident VP who had been my right-hand man and betrayer, but a flawed human being trying to rebuild from ruins, just as I had been doing 2 years ago. "Thank you," I said finally, offering my hand. "I appreciate that more than you know." He shook it, relief washing over his features. "I should go. This is your day, and I don't want to bring old ghosts to the party." "Stay," I offered, surprising myself. "Have some cake at least. Lisa makes the catering staff use her grandmother's recipe. It's worth experiencing." A genuine smile broke through his guarded expression. "Maybe just for a little while." As he moved toward the refreshment table, Lisa appeared at my side, slipping her arm through mine. "Was that Ryan?" I confirmed. "He came to apologize." She studied my face. "And you're okay with that?" I considered the question seriously. "I think I am. Holding on to anger takes too much energy. And watching him today, I realized something important." "What's that?" she asked, leaning into me. "That forgiveness isn't about absolving the other person. It's about freeing yourself." I pressed a kiss to her temple. "I don't want to carry that weight anymore. Not today. Not ever again." Lisa smiled up at me, love and pride shining in her eyes. "That," she said softly, "is why I married you." As the evening progressed, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The painful test that revealed Vanessa's true nature had seemed like an ending at the time, the collapse of everything I thought I wanted. Instead, it had been the beginning of something far more valuable: authenticity, the freedom to be exactly who I was, to build a life based on genuine connection rather than appearances. When Lisa and I took to the dance floor for our first dance as husband and wife, I held her close, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered against her ear. "For what?" she asked, pulling back slightly to see my face. "For loving me," I said simply. "The real me, not the bank account or the company or the status, just me." Her eyes softened. "That's the easiest thing I've ever done, James Parker, and the best decision I'll ever make." As we swayed together under the twinkling lights, surrounded by people who truly cared for us, I silently thanked Vanessa and the painful lesson she had taught me. Without that betrayal, without facing the hollow core of what I thought was love, I might never have recognized the real thing when it finally found me. Sometimes the most painful detours lead us exactly where we need to be. And sometimes what feels like ending is really just the beginning of a far better story. 5 years into our marriage, Lisa and I found ourselves facing an unexpected challenge that would test the foundation we'd built together. It wasn't a betrayal this time, but something equally capable of revealing a person's true character: failure. Parker International's ambitious expansion into sustainable energy technology had encountered a perfect storm of problems: patent disputes, manufacturing delays, and a market that wasn't ready for our innovations. The stock had plummeted 40% in 3 months, wiping billions off the company's value. The board was panicking, investors were demanding answers, and the financial press that had once lauded me as a visionary was now questioning my judgment. "James?" Lisa's voice pulled me from the quarterly reports I'd been staring at for hours. She stood in the doorway of our home office, concern etched across her features. "It's past midnight. Come to bed." I sighed, rubbing my eyes. "I can't. The board meeting tomorrow will still happen whether you've slept or not," she finished, crossing the room to stand behind me. Her hands found my shoulders, working at the knots of tension there. "But you'll handle it better if you're not exhausted." I leaned back into her touch, allowing myself a moment of vulnerability. "What if I can't fix this, Lisa? What if this is the end of everything I've built?" She turned my chair to face her, kneeling so we were eye to eye. "Then we start again," she said simply. "James, look at me. You are not Parker International. Your worth isn't tied to its stock price. If the company fails, and I'm not saying it will, but if it does, we'll be okay." "Easy to say when we have millions in the bank," I muttered, immediately regretting the bitterness in my tone. Lisa didn't flinch. "You think that's what I mean? The money?" She shook her head. "I mean, we'll be okay because you're still you. Brilliant, determined, passionate about making a difference. Those qualities don't disappear with a failing business venture." I searched her face, finding nothing but sincere conviction. "Most people would be panicking about now." A smile tugged at her lips. "I'm not most people. And neither are you." She stood, holding out her hand. "Come to bed. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together, rested and clear-headed." I took her hand, marveling again at how different this was from my previous marriage. Vanessa would have been halfway out the door at the first sign of financial trouble. Lisa saw it as just another challenge we would weather together. The board meeting the next day was as brutal as I'd anticipated. Angry shareholders, nervous executives, and pointed questions about my leadership. I presented my plan for course correction, scaling back certain initiatives, doubling down on the areas showing promise, bringing in strategic partners to share both risk and potential reward. "With all due respect, Mr. Parker," said Eleanor Winters, our newest board member and most vocal critic, "these sound like band-aids on a bullet wound. Perhaps it's time to consider more substantial changes." The implication hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. She was suggesting I step down. I felt every eye in the room on me, waiting for my reaction. 5 years ago, I would have seen this as an attack on my very identity. My worth as a man and as a leader would have been inseparable from my position as CEO. Now, I took a measured breath and met Eleanor's gaze directly. "You may be right, Ms. Winters. If my leadership is no longer serving the best interests of this company, I'll be the first to acknowledge that." Murmurs rippled around the table. "However, I believe the plan I've outlined gives us the best chance at recovery. I'm asking for 6 months to implement these changes. If we don't see significant improvement by then, I'll tender my resignation voluntarily." Eleanor looked surprised, clearly having expected either defensive anger or desperate pleading. After a moment, she nodded. 6 months seems reasonable. With quarterly checkpoints, of course." "Of course," I agreed, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over me. The stakes were enormous. My company, my legacy, my professional reputation, and yet I realized that I was no longer defined by these external markers of success. Whatever happened, I would still be James Parker. I would still have value and purpose. When I returned home that evening, Lisa was waiting, her face a question. "They gave me 6 months," I told her, loosening my tie. "If the situation doesn't improve, I'm out." Instead of sympathy or reassurance, her response surprised me. "So what are you going to do with your 6 months?" I blinked. "Everything in the recovery plan. Cut costs, focus on the most promising technologies, bring in strategic partners." "No," she interrupted gently. "I mean, what are you going to do differently? If doing the same things that got you here isn't working, what will you change?" Her question stopped me in my tracks. She was right. My recovery plan was solid, but it was essentially a more cautious version of the same strategy that had led to this crisis. If I wanted truly different results, I needed a truly different approach. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I found myself in our garden gazebo, staring up at the stars and reflecting on everything I'd learned since that fateful night when Vanessa had locked me out of my own house. The greatest lesson hadn't been about her betrayal, but about my own misplaced priorities, how I'd been chasing external validation, equating my worth with my achievements. And here I was, 5 years later, falling into the same trap. Different circumstances, same fundamental error. By morning, I had the beginnings of a new plan, not just a business strategy, but a complete reimagining of what Parker International could be and what my role within it should look like. I called an emergency executive meeting, not just with the board, but with department heads from across the company. People looked nervous as they filed into the conference room, clearly expecting announcements of layoffs or restructuring. Instead, I started with a question. What would this company look like if our primary metric for success wasn't profit but positive impact? Confusion rippled through the room. Michael Chen, our CFO, cleared his throat. "James, with all due respect, we're a business, not a charity. Our shareholders expect sustainable growth and returns," I countered. "But what if the path to those returns isn't what we thought? What if, by focusing exclusively on quarterly profits, we're actually limiting our long-term potential?" Over the next 3 hours, I outlined my vision. Parker International would transition from a traditional corporation to a benefit corporation, a legal designation that allowed us to consider social and environmental impact alongside profit in our decision-making process. We would restructure our energy division to focus on partnerships with developing nations, bringing affordable, sustainable technology to communities that needed it most. We would implement profit sharing with employees at all levels, creating a culture where everyone had a stake in our success. "This isn't just idealism," I explained as skeptical faces stared back at me. "It's strategic. The market for luxury tech in developed nations is saturated. But there are billions of people in developing regions who need exactly what we can provide, if we can make it affordable and accessible." Eleanor Winters, surprisingly, was the first to speak in support. "The numbers back this up," she said, pulling up research on her tablet. "Companies with strong social missions consistently outperform their peers over 10-year periods. Lower employee turnover, stronger customer loyalty, better press. It translates to real value." Slowly, the mood in the room shifted from skepticism to cautious optimism. By the end of the day, we had the framework for a bold new direction, one that would either save the company or become my professional epitaph. The next 6 months were the most challenging and rewarding of my career. We restructured departments, renegotiated contracts, and established partnerships with nonprofits and governmental organizations in Southeast Asia and Africa. We scaled back our luxury product lines and poured resources into developing affordable versions of our most promising technologies. Every step was met with resistance, from market analysts who didn't understand our strategy, from executives who feared change, from shareholders who wanted quick returns. But with each small victory, with each successful pilot program in a remote village or urban slum, momentum built. Our employees, initially nervous about the changes, became our most passionate advocates as they connected with the new mission. 5 months in, a breakthrough. Our simplified solar technology, deployed in a rural community in Nigeria, proved so successful that the government contracted us to expand to 50 more villages. The international press coverage was extensive and positive. Other countries began reaching out with similar proposals. When the 6-month board meeting arrived, I walked in with confidence not based on our stock price, which had stabilized but not yet recovered, but on the fundamental strength of our new direction. I presented not just financial projections, but stories of villages with electricity for the first time, of children studying after dark, of small businesses flourishing with reliable power. This is just the beginning, I concluded. We've laid the groundwork for sustainable growth that creates value for shareholders while genuinely improving lives. If you still feel a change in leadership is necessary, I'll respect that decision. But I believe the path forward is clear, and I'd like to continue leading Parker International on this journey. The vote was unanimous. I would stay on as CEO with a mandate to continue our transformation. As I left the boardroom, Eleanor Winters fell into step beside me. I owe you an apology, James. I thought you were just another ego-driven CEO who couldn't adapt. I was wrong. I smiled. 6 months ago, you might have been right. Sometimes we need to be pushed to the edge to see clearly. That evening, Lisa and I celebrated with a quiet dinner at home. Her choice, though I'd offered the fanciest restaurant in the city. As we sat on our terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, she raised her glass. To the new Parker International. I clinked my glass against hers. And to the wise woman who asked the right question at the right time. She smiled, pleased but dismissive. I just gave you a nudge. You found the path yourself. That's what real partnership looks like, I said, reaching for her hand. Helping each other see what we might miss on our own. As we sat in comfortable silence, I reflected on the parallel journeys of my personal and professional lives. Both had required painful disruption to break free from old patterns. Both had led to something far more authentic and meaningful than what came before. The transformation of Parker International continued over the next 2 years, exceeding even my most optimistic projections. Our sustainable energy solutions spread across developing regions, creating a foundation of goodwill and brand loyalty that translated into steady growth. The stock recovered and then surpassed its previous high, but that no longer seemed like the most important metric of success. What mattered more were the stories that came back from the field, of hospitals that could now operate safely through the night, of schools with functioning computers, of entire communities lifted from energy poverty. Our employees spoke about their work with pride and purpose, and talented people from across the industry sought us out, wanting to be part of what we were building. The personal transformation was equally profound. Lisa and I welcomed twins, a boy and a girl, who brought chaos and joy in equal measure to our ordered lives. Parenthood revealed new dimensions to both of us, strengths and vulnerabilities we hadn't known we possessed. I watched Lisa, brilliant and accomplished in her own right, navigate motherhood with the same thoughtful intentionality she brought to everything. And I found myself fundamentally reconsidering what legacy truly meant. It wasn't about buildings with my name on them, or financial empires that would outlast me. It was about the values I embodied and passed on. It was about showing our children that success is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. One evening, as I sat on the floor of the nursery, watching our son and daughter sleep, Lisa found me there, lost in thought. She settled beside me, leaning her head against my shoulder. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" she asked softly. "Legacies," I admitted. "How different my idea of that is now from what it once was." She nodded, understanding as always. "Less about empire building, more about impact?" "Exactly, and about them." I gestured to our sleeping children. "What they'll remember about me, what values they'll see lived out." Lisa was quiet for a moment, considering. "You know, the most powerful legacy isn't what we leave behind when we're gone. It's how we live while we're here, what we prioritize, how we treat people, the choices we make when things get difficult." She looked up at me. "By that measure, you're building quite a legacy already." Her words settled into my heart, affirming something I'd been feeling but hadn't fully articulated. The journey from the man I'd been, status-focused, externally validated, married to a woman who valued me only for what I provided, to the man I was becoming, had been painful but necessary. Each step, even the missteps, had been part of the process. 2 months later, at a charity gala for the Parker Foundation, I found myself face to face with Vanessa for the first time in 7 years. She looked different, less polished, somehow more substantial. The designer dress and perfect makeup remained, but the desperate need for attention that had once defined her was gone. "James," she greeted me, neither warm nor cold. "Congratulations on all your success. The foundation is doing remarkable work." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely appreciative. "How are you, Vanessa?" A small, authentic smile crossed her face. "I'm good, actually. Really good. I'm teaching now, business ethics, ironically enough, at the community college. And I'm engaged." She gestured across the room to a man in conversation with one of our foundation directors. "That's Daniel. He's a high school principal." I studied her, finding no trace of the status-hungry woman who had once been my wife. "You seem happy." "I am," she confirmed. "It took a long time and a lot of therapy, but I finally figured out what actually matters." She hesitated, then added, "Our marriage was a mistake, James. We brought out the worst in each other. But I learned from it. I hope you did too." Before I could respond, Lisa appeared at my side, politely curious. I made the introductions, watching carefully for any sign of tension, but there was none. Just two confident women who knew exactly who they were and what they valued, exchanging pleasantries without pretense. As Vanessa moved away to rejoin her fiancé, Lisa squeezed my hand. "That was surprisingly nice." "People change," I reflected. "Sometimes for the better. When they're willing to face themselves honestly," Lisa agreed. "That's the hardest part. Seeing past the stories we tell ourselves to the truth underneath." That night, lying in bed beside Lisa, I thought about the strange winding path that had led me here. The betrayal that had felt like an ending had actually been the beginning of a journey toward authenticity. The professional crisis that had threatened everything I'd built had become the catalyst for something far more meaningful. Every challenge, every setback, every painful revelation had been an invitation to grow, to shed old definitions of success and embrace new ones based on impact, integrity, and genuine connection. 10 years after that fateful night when Vanessa had locked me out of my house, I stood on a stage in Rwanda, inaugurating a manufacturing facility that would bring affordable clean energy technology to millions. Beside me stood Lisa and our now 7-year-old twins, along with local officials and community leaders. As I looked out at the faces of the workers who would operate the facility, people who now had stable, well-paying jobs and ownership shares in the operation, I felt a sense of fulfillment that no amount of wealth or status could have provided. This was success, not measured in dollars or stock options or magazine profiles, but in lives improved, in problems solved, in a world made slightly better through purposeful work. Later, as our family toured a village where our solar technology had been installed a year earlier, my daughter tugged at my hand. "Daddy," she said, pointing to a group of children playing under lights powered by our panels. "Did you make those lights work?" I knelt beside her, finding the right words. "Not just me, sweetheart. Lots of people working together. But yes, our company helped bring electricity here so these children can play and study even after the sun goes down." She considered this seriously. "That's better than having a big house, isn't it?" Out of the mouths of babes. I looked up at Lisa, who was trying not to smile too obviously at our daughter's perceptiveness. "Yes," I agreed. "It's much better than having a big house. Although," I added, tickling her ribs until she giggled, "I'm very grateful we have a nice home, too." That evening, as the African sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, Lisa and I sat on the balcony of our hotel room, watching our children play an elaborate game of their own invention on the bed inside. "They're amazing," I said softly, "so intuitive about what really matters." "Children often are," Lisa replied, "until the world teaches them otherwise." She turned to face me, her expression thoughtful. "That's the real work, isn't it? Not just building businesses or even helping communities, but preserving that innate wisdom, teaching them to measure success by impact, not accumulation." I nodded, once again struck by her ability to distill complex truths to their essence. It all comes full circle. The lessons we learn become the lessons we teach. As I reflected on the journey, from self-centered success to purpose-driven impact, from a marriage based on status to one built on authentic partnership, I realized that the betrayal that had once seemed like the worst moment of my life had actually been a gift. It had stripped away the illusions, forced me to confront what really mattered, and set me on a path toward genuine fulfillment. The test I'd created for Vanessa had revealed far more about me than it had about her. We had both been trapped in a narrative of success that brought material wealth but spiritual poverty. The pain of that revelation had been necessary to break free and find a better way. Life's greatest challenges aren't obstacles to happiness, they're invitations to growth. The betrayals, failures, and disappointments that feel like endings are often beginnings in disguise. Opportunities to shed old versions of ourselves and step into something more authentic, more meaningful, more aligned with our deepest values. If you're facing such a moment now, a betrayal, a failure, a loss that seems to define you, remember that this is not the end of your story. It's simply the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The question isn't whether you'll be wounded. We all are. The question is what you'll create from the wound, what wisdom you'll extract from the pain, what new path you'll forge from the rubble of what's been destroyed. True wealth isn't measured in dollars but in impact. True success isn't about what you acquire but who you become. And true love isn't about what someone brings to your life, but how they help you grow into your best self. This is the legacy worth building, not empires of wealth, but monuments of character. Not accolades from strangers, but the quiet knowing that you've lived in alignment with your deepest values. Not power over others, but the strength to transform your own pain into purpose. Whatever challenge you're facing, whatever betrayal or failure threatens to define you, remember that you are not what happens to you. You are what you choose to create from it. And that choice, made again and again, day after day, is what ultimately shapes a life of meaning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.